I am so privileged and excited to introduce you to Dr. Robert Hedaya. And he is a pioneer in the field of psychiatry. He does functional medicine, and he has come up with this treatment method that can be the next thing for aphasia treatment. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to learn a little bit about the brain. We're going to see some pictures. He's going to talk all about this treatment. We are focused on aphasia today, but he's also going to tell us how this treatment can also be applied to other brain conditions. This is very exciting. Life after stroke, aphasia, Parkinson's, or communication changes can feel unfamiliar for you and the people who care about you. But there is hope. Progress starts with small wins, and those wins add up. I created the Listen for Life Aphasia podcast to help you and your loved ones take simple, actionable steps each week. Whether you're rebuilding communication or supporting someone who is, you're not alone. I'm Genevieve, founder of Life Speech Pathology. For over 30 years, I've helped individuals and families rediscover confidence, connection, and joy, one win at a time. Let's take the next step together. Dr. Hedaya, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Really a pleasure.
This is wonderful. Would you tell us a little bit about how you came into being a physician, psychiatry to neuroscience, cutting edge of neuroscience and treatment?
Well, it's like the song, A Long and Winding Road. Okay. So I decided to become a doctor really just because that's what I thought my only choice in life was becoming a doctor. I had very good grades in college. I was Phi Beta Kappa, but I was terrified that I wouldn't get into medical school. And I applied to 40 medical schools, did not get into one medical school despite my grades. It was quite competitive, but I was really so anxious that I flubbed my interviews. I ended up going to Mexico for 2 years because I was determined to be a doctor. So I went to Mexico and I studied, and it was being in Mexico studying medicine was horrible for me. They took me out of one exam and cut my hair because my hair was too long. Literally, I'm not exaggerating, literally cut my hair. And when I had my first child, my son was born in Mexico, and they wanted to send me out of the city for 6 weeks. And my wife had just had a C-section. I said, I begged them to keep me in the city because we didn't have anyone there. And the owner of the school said to me, she says, literally, I don't give a shit about your son. And I saw red and I said, that's it, I got to get out of here. So what I did, and this is the critical point, is I took off 6 months. I decided, okay, I got to take off. I got to study medicine on my own. I got to score really well on the national board exam so I could transfer back to the United States. So I took off 6 months. I studied 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And I'll tell you, I really learned medicine. And I learned medicine in such a way that I would never have learned it in an American medical school. I didn't memorize things, I understood things. I was able to predict based on certain patterns how certain cancers would spread in the body because I understood the physiology. I understood the pathophysiology. So I got such an amazing grounding in medicine there, which really I didn't know at the time, set the stage for my approaching medicine by really trying to understand what's going on, not just labeling things, not following an algorithm, just like what is going on? What do we know about the physiology? What is the basic science? Tell us what are the prime basic principles of medicine? And I follow those because the evidence base in medicine is quite corrupted. It's not all corrupted, but it's quite corrupted by, influences and money and, need for grants, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I transferred back to the United States. I went to Buffalo State University of Medical, State University of New York at Buffalo, and then was going to be a surgeon. And I was very fortunate to take an elective in child psychiatry, which blew my mind because the mind was so incredible. I learned how to do hypnosis on a guy who had pain and cured his pain. And I was like, well, I will never get bored here. That's never get bored here. So I switched to psychiatry. I was very fortunate to go to Georgetown School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry, which was fabulous. We had training in so many areas at that time. It was just absolutely so rich. And I became a psychiatrist. And 2 years in, I was bored out of my mind. And I went to my mentor and I said to him, like, what am I going to do? I got another 40 years. I'm going to go out of my mind. He says, look, if you don't keep learning, you're not going to do this. So I started learning and I kept learning and learning. And then I finally, in early 90s, 92, 93, I started to write my first book. And I published the first book, which now I could look back, had the essentials of functional medicine in it that I was already figuring out before functional medicine was even on the map. And after that, I developed chronic fatigue syndrome. I was exhausted because I was running a heavy practice and writing a book and had 3 children. And, it was a lot and I was exhausted. And so I diagnosed in myself chronic fatigue syndrome, treated myself basically with diet and exercise, recovered fully, and started to learn about Jeff Bland's functional medicine. And I was, I think, the second class. So functional medicine, for people who don't know, is basically root cause medicine, where you look at the root causes of disease and you look at digestion and nutrition and hormones and immune function and infection and toxicology and head injuries and body trauma, et cetera, as well as the normal psychosocial things. So fast forward, I learned functional medicine. I was the first psychiatrist to practice it, and met with Abraham Hoffer after my second book was written, and he's the founder of orthomolecular psychiatry. And he told me the second book I wrote was the book that he wished he wrote, and it was a high compliment. And that was it. I had been doing a lot of psychopharmacology, and now I'm doing functional medicine, and at that time treating a lot of people with treatment-resistant depression. And after about 2-3 years of doing functional medicine, I noticed that like everyone's getting better. And I was like, maybe I'm lying to myself. It could be selective attention to the positive, right? So I hired a statistician to look at all my data. And in fact, everyone was getting better. 23 patients with treatment-resistant depression that I had treated over the course of 2 years or 3 years. Every single one of them normalized without any change in medication. And these treatment-resistant depression, and their diabetes went away, and their osteoporosis went away, and even in one person, MS lesions went away. And I was like, wow. So that was it, functional medicine all the way, a little psychopharmacology where needed. And then what happened was I had actually an incorrect diagnosis, and I thought I had to retire. So I closed my practice in 2014, and which was devastating and probably the hardest thing I ever had to do. It was almost really like losing your child. It was really like losing a child. I felt terrible for my patients because I couldn't really just say, well, go see Joe Blow down the block, because there was no Joe Blow doing what I'm doing. It was very painful, but eventually I found out the diagnosis was incorrect and came back into practice. And while I was off practice, I had time to read. So I sat down one day on a hammock for 6 hours, and I was reading a book, and I saw how lasers work. And in Russia, they were using lasers since 1985. I said, wow, this could really help the brain. But how would I know where to aim it? How would I know what to do? So then I learned about quantitative EEG, which gave me the tools to know what's going on in real time in the brain. I said, wow, now I know what to do. So fast forward to about 2017, and I treated my first patient after learning about lasers and qEEGs for 2 or 3 years. Treated my first patient who had early dementia. And I did not know that she had something called facial blindness. Facial blindness is, I meet you right now, Genevieve, and then I see you in about 30 minutes. Oh, have we ever met before? I wouldn't remember. So she had acquired facial blindness for 7 years. She was in her mid 50s. And actually, I can show you, I'll show you what happened, but I'll tell you the bottom line is that after the first laser treatment, she came into my office to schedule the next treatment. And she said, "Oh my God, I can remember the face of the person I worked with this morning and her husband and the dimple on his face." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean? What do you mean you can remember the face?" She, "Oh yeah, I can't remember faces. When I do my work, I write extremely detailed reports and I take pictures of everybody and everything because I can't rely on my facial memory." I'm like, "What? I never heard of this. What would tell me more?" Well, her facial blindness was cured. Why? Well, first of all, I was astounded because not I had accidentally treated something I didn't even know existed. And I have no place in my brain at that point for understanding how a chronic condition, neurological condition, could actually be reversed in like minutes. This I couldn't. I came home. I couldn't. I had no way of putting this into a context. It was very difficult. So, but what happened was the laser basically provided energy and blood flow to the area of the brain we targeted. And it woke up the cells. They were alive. They were in what we call a liminal state. They were alive. They were breathing, but they weren't doing any functions. So we gave them a boost and they started functioning. And she remained, her facial blindness was cured. So we published this. It's the first reported case. And then I sent it out to 100 neurologists, the hard copies, because this is exciting. And nobody contacted me at all. So, and I think that's for two reasons. One is that neurologists treat migraines, they treat stroke, this is what they deal with. They don't even ask about facial blindness. And the other thing is that there's a very narrow mentality, like people are algorithmic. This is what I do, this is how I do it. Don't confuse me with new information. Maybe if the government tells me that there's new information, it's approved, and they reviewed it, then I'll deal with it. But I'm different. I'm not. I'm always looking to understand and figure out what's going on. I'm not going to rely. People come to you with things that can't be treated. You want to help them. You can't wait 20 years for and who's going to do this study anyway? There's no money in it, right? So anyway, that's the situation. What I'd like to do is share the paper so I can start to teach people a little bit about what we're doing. So this, for people who can see, this is called reversal of acquired prosopagnosia. Prosopagnosia is facial blindness using quantitative EEG, electroencephalography guided laser therapy. So basically use the qEEG to guide where we treat the laser. Now, this is a woman who came to me really with early dementia. Okay, we did not know that she had facial blindness, and she had a lot of history, which I won't go into. And this is a representation of the qEEG. What you see here on the upper panel here, you basically see 8 brains. We're looking at the top 4 brains. And you see the gray areas are normal, and the yellow areas are overactive or unstable, and the blue areas are slow. Both of these are problems. And the pink here is a listing by number of the surface area of the brain or areas of the brain that are functioning abnormally, which is all these yellow areas here. These gray areas are normal. After 30 treatments, you can see that her brain is essentially normalized. And what's most important is, I don't know if you can see here in this top group of 4, the right-hand upper brain, you may see a little red line here. It's a crosshair crossing the hippocampus. The hippocampus is what's one of the main areas in Alzheimer's disease, which she had the genes for and a strong family history. And that yellow is showing us that the hippocampus, which controls memory functions, is actually not functioning properly. And then you can see after 30 laser treatments and hyperbaric oxygen that she actually had a normalization. You could see in the crosshairs in the bottom four brains on the upper right brain in that bottom panel. You see the crosshairs show that the hippocampus is now gray, which means it's completely normal. So it went from being 2.5 standard deviations out of the norm to 0.4 standard deviations, which is 100% normal. Now, then we stopped the treatment because we want to see, will it just maintain? And unfortunately, it didn't maintain. You could see that she reverted almost to the same place she was before. So she needs maintenance treatment. The bad news is she needs maintenance treatment. The good news is there's treatment. And in fact, her business is thriving and doing better than it ever did before. So I would say that this here lower panel in the gray is where we can keep her with maintenance treatments. I don't know if you have any questions on this.
Wow. The
Yeah.
picture says 1,000 words, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just seeing that 30 treatments, you said,
Yeah.
change that. So just so the audience understands a little bit about the maintenance. And we know that it's different for every person, but in this clinical presentation, what does maintenance look like for her?
So for her, maintenance is once a week laser.
Okay.
And it's a small price to pay, really, for having a fully functioning brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the key question that it always comes up, because it's an important question as well, do I need maintenance? And not everybody needs maintenance, actually. It depends on what the disease process underlying is. She had ApoE4 genes, putting her at risk for Alzheimer's, meaning her physiology, her biochemistry, her metabolism was always pushing her towards dementia, right? So if we push it back with the laser, and the laser actually breaks down and removes amyloid protein from the brain, right? So if we can just keep pushing that back, yeah, we have to keep pushing back, but we can push back.
Right. When there wasn't something for this before. That's
Right.
amazing. Doctor, we have a question. I'd love to pop it up here. Samantha is asking, what type of lasers are used?
Well, so it varies on the patient, and when you look up lasers, you'll see there are different types of things. There's several different types of lasers, and there are also LEDs, light emitting diodes. So people use these helmets. You can't target very well what you're trying to target. You can only target by quadrant, meaning you can divide the brain in 4 places. The second thing is we're using strong lasers, which is 20 watts or 30 watts, mostly 30 watts, which is more power and quicker. And we know that it penetrates into the brain, but only 2.64% or so of the light actually penetrates through the hair and the skull and the skin and the meninges and the blood vessels, right? So if you're using a LED, one of these helmets,
Yeah.
those are half a watt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 1/60th of the power, right? And the question really is it penetrating the brain, or you're getting a benefit in the brain through indirect effects, which could be like helping the mitochondria as the blood flows through the skin or the skull. So the people that are doing the studies on these helmet LEDs, these people are the people who own the company. And as we know, there's publication bias, when you're trying to sell a product and you're conducting the studies. We know that from the pharmaceutical industry. For example, in 2008, there was a paper by Eric Turner, in the New England Journal of Medicine, and he showed that with antidepressant trials, we say, oh, antidepressants, they really work for depression, right? Well, he showed that the drug companies wanted to publish 74, I believe, studies for antidepressant trials, but they only published 36 or so, could be 37 or 38 or something. And it turns out they only published the ones that had positive results. right? And all the ones with negative results, they didn't publish, right? Because they're selling drugs. And I'm not saying antidepressants don't work. They do work in certain situations. They're very helpful. But there's a dramatic, extreme assumption that they work most of the time. And in fact, they don't. They don't work most of the time. And they don't work most of the time because there are underlying conditions that are not being treated. So we know there's selective publication bias, and these helmets the studies are being done by the companies that manufacture them and promote them. So that raises the question of publication bias. Maybe they do work. I hope they do work. I haven't seen yet. I've used them in a few people. I haven't seen that they work, but I haven't ruled it out. So what we do is we use the laser, and there are different types of laser that we use, and it depends on the patient. For example, I'm looking at a qEEG of someone I'm going to treat with laser. He has a stroke, and I looked at his qEEG, and we're waiting for the MRI because we have to clear him for the treatment. But it looks pretty clear to me he's going to benefit, and I'll know what frequency to use, what wavelength, and I'll take his history to make sure I don't use another frequency. We've learned a lot. There's a lot we have to learn still, but
Absolutely.
you know,
Again, that there isn't anything else out there right now, and that's what's so exciting. So can we pivot a little bit and talk more about stroke?
yes, yeah.
Where do you want to start? Is this a treatment that could work for ischemic stroke versus hemorrhagic?
Okay, so let's start with aphasia. Okay,
You got it.
we know we have, there's different classifications, right? But broadly speaking, we have expressive aphasia, receptive aphasia, difficulty understanding language, difficulty producing language, right? And these things, they're actually not so precisely limited to just language, actually. Now, when you have a primary progressive aphasia, there are other conditions that come along with this, sometimes frontotemporal dementia or other dimensions, other cognitive problems, Lewy body dementia, head injuries, all of these things. The PPA is just a kind of an umbrella term. It's progressive aphasia, and you don't really know why, but you can probably figure out why, because there's usually a reason. So with that, we've had already really good results with the laser. And I'll tell you the first story of when I saw this. A guy came to me, his wife had dementia. She couldn't speak. She couldn't finish one sentence. I mean, he had to give me the whole history. This was a 2-year-old, overweight, diabetic. She wouldn't do any functional medicine. She wouldn't change her diet. She wouldn't take her medicine. She refused to do anything. She had an expressive aphasia. She was fully understanding everything, but she wouldn't do anything. Her husband begged me to use the laser, and I said no, it's pointless. She hasn't done any of the functional medicine. It's not going to work. He begged me and begged me when I kept saying no, because I just felt, look, as it is, we get 2.6 or 2.9% light going through. Then she has hair. She won't shave her head. And then she has black skin, so it's going to absorb the light further. And she hasn't done any of the functional medicine. It's not going to work. Not going to do this. It doesn't make sense. He called me. He accused me of being a racist. And if he knew me, he'd know I'm very far from a racist. So anyway, I said, finally, I gave in. I said, all right, fine, we'll do it. Okay. So I'm sitting in my office making her laser plan, and it pops out of my lips, God, I need a miracle. And okay, we go in, we start doing the laser. He's in the room. I'm in the room. My staff is in the room. She starts talking. I'm like, again, another one of these moments. I have tears down my eyes. He's got tears. Fast forward, we did roughly 20 treatments. I was able to sit down with her alone and have a 45-minute psychotherapy session where she really completed 95% of her sentences. So I was like, first of all, you don't need functional medicine for this to work. Second of all, you don't have to shave, because we were shaving every month to get the hair out of the way wherever we targeted. You don't need to shave. And it's amazing. You don't have to worry about dark skin. This is amazing, right? It blew my mind. Again, my mind was blown, right? So we have other cases. I could read you something someone wrote maybe later. So that's the primary progressive aphasia. a few stories I could tell you there. Now, when it comes to the hemorrhagic ischemic stroke or something, there's a little bit of literature. There's a case report of somebody doing better. There are a study of 4 people who did better with using LEDs in a particular mode. It's just not a lot of literature, right? And I am just embarking on that experience, right? So I have reason to think it will work, and the reason I think it will work is because, you're going to have, whether through ischemia, right, or whether through hemorrhagic stroke, you're going to have an area of the brain that has been destroyed, whatever size it is. Now, in the boundaries of that area are going to be cells that are alive but are barely functional, right? They're liminal, like the woman with the facial blindness. I think we should be able to wake them up, number one. Number two, there's actually some evidence that if you use laser in the acute stroke, that you actually limit the area of damage, right? And that's because you're providing these cells that are stressed with energy and growth and blood flow, et cetera.
Yeah.
So we have that. And then there's the other issue, which I think my guess is with a lot of people who have aphasia from stroke, they can't speak. You can't really measure their intellectual function very well. They may have more cognitive deficits than you think, or than we think, but it's hard to measure. But on the qEEG, we can see it. So this guy that I'm be treating, he actually shows a tremendous deficit of energy in the brain, throughout his brain. And I'm like, if you ask me, I'd say I'm 90% sure I can help him. How much will his speech improve? I don't know. Will his cognitive function improve? Oh yeah. Will he get significant benefits? Yes. Now, what we're going to do with him, I think, is actually use neurofeedback as well, because one of the pathways that is involved with language is impaired, and it's specific. It's the arcuate fasciculus, and so we're going to work with that. So, it's too early. I can't sit here and tell you I've done 5 hemorrhagic strokes and 5 ischemic strokes. I can't give you that. Right now, I'm trying to help people who don't have any help, and I have good reason to think that I can help. If I find out, if I do this with 3 or 4 people and I can't help, then I'm not going to keep doing it, because I expect to see results.
Absolutely. Boy, my own mind is blown. And I also wonder if there's a role with speech pathology doing,
Yes.
having this as a, much like functional medicine.
Yes.
We're looking at root cause. If we do those laser treatments and then we are reinforcing those pathways, because we know that if you want to build your bicep, you've got to exercise it.
Exactly. Yes, I feel very clearly and strongly that using this with speech pathology will augment the effect of the speech pathology, speech therapy, I should say.
Right.
And also what we're doing is we're getting a baseline measure of their aphasia.
Yeah.
And then after treatment, we're getting a follow-up measure. And see, we want objective measures. We don't want, I think he's doing better. We don't really want that. We want an objective measure. We're going to have the objective change on the qEEG, and then we're going to have the objective measures with the speech pathology testing pre-post. And then, God willing, this works, we will apply for a grant at NIH and try and do a larger study and get it on the map.
So before we started recording today, what I wanted folks to capture is your excitement about this technology and how you didn't have to come back and do this after your time in the hammock, right? When you actually had some time to decompress and read, and that's when this idea came to you.
Right.
You are very, very passionate about this possibility, as am I. I mean, that's why you're here. That's why we're talking about it.
You know what? I'm passionate about everything that I do in psychiatry. Because as my mentor told me, keep learning. I keep learning, and I want to solve problems for people. And when I solve a problem, I'm like over the moon. I just am so thrilled. Now, I was passionate about functional medicine. I started teaching. I wrote a book on it. I wrote a second book. My third book was for clinicians on depression. It's a monograph on depression because this stuff needs to be out there. People are suffering. They're relying on a psychopharmacology model or whatever the model is, whatever the disease is. So many of these things, we have limited treatments. And if there's stuff that can be done, it needs to be done. And it's quite frustrating, really, that it doesn't really get the press, but my job is to just keep pushing forward and keep teaching. And that's what I do.
How big of an area can you target with a laser?
You can target whatever you want. It's just you're moving the laser. First of all, I should explain is basically light,
Mm-hmm.
and the light goes through the skull and through the layers, and the photon, the particle of light, goes to the mitochondria. The mitochondria, for people who don't know, is the energy factory of the cell. So it's like a little battery. It's kind of it's shaped like a battery. It's long and narrow, has 4 pores where the electrons hop from pore to pore to pore to the fourth pore. And the fourth pore, the electrons come through there and they generate ATP. ATP is the energy molecule. Without that, we're all dead. You don't have ATP, boom, you're done. Okay, you're done. So we need the ATP, right? At the exit of this fourth pore in the mitochondria, there's a nitric oxide molecule, NO, nitric oxide, and it kind of controls how much ATP comes out through that fourth pore. So the photon bumps that nitric oxide off the fourth pore, and the ATP comes flowing through. Now the cell has energy. Now the cell says, now I got energy. I could do what I need to do. It knows what to do. Now it can do it. Now the nitric oxide diffuses and increases blood flow to the tissue. And it actually acts as what's called a retrograde neurotransmitter and actually does some other things. Then you get downstream, you get growth factors, you get normalization of the immune system in the brain, cleaning up debris, astroglia, microglia, tau proteins, etc. There's so many downstream effects. So the effect can happen acutely with the energy, and then downstream over time, there's repair that occurs, right?
Yeah. So I know you have lots of work ahead of you. There's so many clinical applications of this. I think I heard you say that if somebody had an acute stroke, that would be the best time to apply this kind of a treatment for them, because you're also adding hyperbaric oxygen treatment to it. And I'd love for you to explain that a little bit more, just so people understand how, again, you're treating the whole person. This is functional medicine at its core. But that acute insult, that's probably the maximum time. But I also think that chronic conditions could be improved. It may not be solved, may not go back to zero, right? That impairment.
Yeah, so I would say that let's make a distinction here, okay? It's an important distinction. So we do functional medicine, and I always thought functional medicine had to be done before the laser,
Mm-hmm.
HYLANE, HYLANE,
Mm-hmm.
is what we call it, and it's hyperbaric oxygen, laser, and neural exercises, meaning neurofeedback, and maybe some other exercises. We don't use all 3 components in everybody. It depends on the person. Some people, for example, if you have a Babesia infection, we don't really want to put you in the hyperbaric oxygen because Babesia actually lives and thrives on oxygen. So we don't want to make your infection worse. Some people can't go in the hyperbaric. Some people don't need the hyperbaric. Some people do.
Okay.
Neurofeedback is not for everyone. Laser is not for everybody. We have to decide. So the main finding and the main thing I've learned in the last few years is I can actually help people by jumping in with the HYLANE program. up front and then go to the functional medicine if it makes sense. So it used to be I have to put them through a whole 6-month period of functional medicine. And now I'm like, I don't have to do that. I could get them feeling better and then they can follow a functional medicine program. And the other thing that you mentioned is this has application in other conditions. We've used it in treatment-resistant depression with great success. We've used it in people with chronic fatigue, long COVID. This is pretty astounding to me, people with schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder. Now, the big key here is in the schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, or the bipolar disorder, it really depends on the resources the patient has. Meaning, do they have someone who's really going to make them do what they got to do because they can't do it themselves? And if you don't have someone who can implement a complex program of functional medicine, then I can't help them. But in people who have a schizoaffective disorder, and they have someone who has the ability, the time, the organizational skills, and the motivation and dedication to their improvement, like a mother who's very organized. Well, I'll give you a couple examples. I have a guy who was in Yemen and he was psychotic and delusional for, I don't know, months, if not years. And I've been treating him for about 1.5 years. His mother's on top of it, doing everything that I ask. And he got his real estate license in 2 states, sold a house, and now is working full-time in an NGO. Okay, and we're lowering his medications. The guy has got his life. He's got a life ahead of him. Another guy who was psychotic and delusional 1.5 years ago, his mother's on top of it, and now he hasn't been able to read for years, and he's now reading, and we're treating underlying tick-borne infections, and use laser and neurofeedback and whatnot. And I have a few of these cases, and then I have other cases where it's tragic because I know what's going on, but they can't implement. And this is the key, really the key, that in so many cases I know what to do, but if you can't implement, it's just a waste of time and money, really.
Yeah. So let's talk about logistics. You are in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
People have to come to you.
Yeah. So they have to come to me. That's why we're aiming for people in the local area, New York, New Jersey, maybe Delaware, Pennsylvania, just because they have to come to me for the laser. And I've tried actually having people get the laser, meaning I help them purchase this medical device. But the problem is they end up abusing it. They end up doing their own thing if I'm not watching, and it's a little scary to me. Could you do damage? You could do damage. Has anyone done damage? No, not that I can tell. But they fall off. They get a little sloppy in what they're doing or whatever. So basically, at this point, I'm doing this and hoping maybe we have a lot of patients from Maryland where we were located before, hoping that I can maybe set up a place in Maryland to do this. I have staff in Maryland, so I can kind of guide this remotely, which I've done many, many times. We have another laser, we could move to Maryland.
Yeah. So somebody is in California, they need to travel, so they need to be there. Are treatments daily?
Treatments will depend on the person. So generally we say, for example, that they would come for, in general, about 4 weeks. And then the treatments could be twice a week or 3 times a week. It kind of depends on what the situation is. And then we do the treatments here,
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll know usually in a couple of weeks, we'll know how they're doing. Actually, very interesting. One of the people I treated early on for aphasia, we actually did a study which I funded on this woman, and we did the laser with pre-post qEEGs. We must have done 30 of them. And then, well, maybe 60 of them actually. Anyways, a lot of qEEGs and a lot of laser treatments because I felt like maybe I can nail down the parameters that she's responding to and whatever. And then we submitted the data to a government agency who processed that. We came up with nothing. and she didn't really respond to the treatment. I learned something a few months ago about using higher energies. And so I contacted the patient. I said, look, this is what I learned. I think it's worth you coming here, let's say for 4 or 5 treatments, and let's see how she does. And his word, he said, the result is astounding. That's his word. So we're trying to figure out how to get her maintenance treatments. She's in Maryland. So yeah, and she has actually her problem stems, it's not a stroke, but she has a really vascular disease, and Lyme disease she had also. And so, but she responded. I mean, he was blown away when he was asking her questions, and she was more fluent, and she was remembering things that she normally wouldn't be able to remember or access. So this is, I don't have any doubt that it's going to be helping a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen in hemorrhagic stroke and how it's going to help, or ischemic stroke, that's remains to be seen. It depends also on how big the stroke is, and how much speech therapy they're actually doing, and can we train, maybe through the neurofeedback, other parts of the brain to take up some of these functions, which the brain does. There's an excellent book you might have read called My Stroke of Insight.
Yep. So good.
Unbelievable.
So good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody should read that book if you have any concerns about brain function, strokes, etc. The brain's so plastic.
It is. And I talk a lot on this show about neuroplasticity in the context of speech therapy work. We have to make sure it's meaningful. It has to have intensity, has to stay consistent. You have to keep challenging yourself. Just like what we were doing right before we hit go live on this recording, we were messing with the tech,
Right.
And I kept joking about neuroplasticity, but it's real.
It's real. I'll tell you an example. I play guitar. So about maybe 15 years ago, I went to a guitar camp, for a week in Portland, I think it was. And they're teaching me some finger picking patterns, and my fingers do not want to do this. And I'm practicing for a few hours a day for 3 days, and I feel literally retarded. I'm like, I am not getting anywhere. And then on the 4th day, all of a sudden I start to get it. It's that S-shaped learning curve. You're doing stuff, your brain is doing stuff, but you don't know. You keep going. You feel so uncoordinated, so incompetent, and so unable to do anything. And then after you keep at it and you keep at it and you keep at it, all of a sudden little things start happening. And then bingo, now it's 10, 15 years. I could still do this thing. I could still play it. I don't play as often as I used to play, but I still can do it, So the brain is plastic. As you said, there's an S-shaped learning curve, and you can't get discouraged. This speech pathology, you got to keep at it. And we believe, I think with good reason, that with the combination of the speech pathology and the HYLANE, we can actually really turbocharge this.
Exactly. Excuse me. Well, I've got a few questions I'd like to have you respond to. So let's show this first one. Can this method be used as a preventative measure or close to the first stage of development, I think probably of a condition?
Yeah, well, the answer is yes. That's the best time. We have some people who come in for dementia prevention because they have a strong family history. But I have a guy, for example, who's 23, who told me, he's having trouble finding his words. So I looked at his qEEG. I see there's something going on in the arcuate fasciculus. I said, all right, let's give you a treatment. So I give him the treatment, and he starts speaking Hebrew. Like he says, I haven't spoken Hebrew in years. He starts speaking fluent Hebrew right there. Now, I don't want people to think that there's always a quick result, because there's not always a quick result. You have to build. Like the woman I showed you the pictures of her brain, it took 30 treatments to get her there. She had one thing that responded quickly, the prosopagnosia, the facial blindness, but the restoration of her whole brain function, it took 30 treatments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't think, oh, got to have magic. We got to have magic. No, we do the treatment, we watch, and then we do a qEEG after about 10 or 12 sessions and see, is the brain responding objectively? We want
Yes,
to measure, you know.
absolutely. Wonderful.
So prevention is always the way to go. So, and I've treated several people actually who have word finding problems. Another person just recently, young 40-year-old, very healthy woman who she says her word finding problems are gone. You know, so yeah.
Wow. Here we have another question. Michael, is the laser treatment set up like radiation therapy for cancer patients, where they lie on a table with a custom mask, helmet, whatever? And also, are there side effects?
Great question. So no, it's very innocuous. This is very simple, really. What we do is we determine the areas we're going to treat based on the qEEG. We put a little cap on your head to make sure we map where on your skull is area F3 or F4 that we want to target. And then we put a little dot with mascara, you know, and we say,
So
okay,
fancy.
it's very fancy. And then we take that little cap off, and then we apply a light, basically the laser light, and which is painless. If you stay in one spot too long, you could feel warmth, excessive warmth or heat, but we're very careful so that never happens. And you don't really feel anything. Now, some people get a mild headache afterwards, very, very mild, very short. That's because of the increased blood flow. It's actually a good sign that the light went through. And then some people can get overly activated. So I'm careful about doing this in someone who might be in an active, I don't do it in someone who's active bipolar disorder, or if their qEEG is showing signs of overactivity in a certain way, we don't do it. And we monitor if their sleep is interrupted or anything like that, we'll pull back, you know. So it's not for everyone all the time. Sometimes we have to pull back and stop the treatment for a while. This painless. We do have to screen them with a certain kind of MRI, make sure there's no vascular problems. We don't want to increase blood flow in a brain that has an aneurysm, obviously, or a cyst or something like that. So we always get a baseline MRI to make sure that it's safe.
Yeah, wonderful. All right. Oh, here's the $1 million question, literally. How much?
The obvious question.
The obvious question, right?
Yeah. So, and the obvious answer is it depends, right? No, so I'll kind of break it out for you. So let's put the functional medicine aside.
Mm-hmm.
The functional medicine is the most costly and time consuming and resource intensive. So we'll talk just about this. So now, if someone comes to me, let's take the example of someone coming with a primary progressive aphasia. Okay. So what they're going to do is they would contact us through our website, which is like Whole Foods, only whole psychiatry. Yeah. It's not whole psychology, it's whole psychiatry. And we're putting up an aphasia page in the next couple of weeks. And so they'll contact us. And basically the process is this. The cost you're going to need a qEEG with analysis that's about $2,000. Then you're going to collect your records and we'll send you questionnaires. We may or may not have you do some lab tests before, which are usually done at LabCorp, so your insurance covers those. And then we will meet. Typically, my usual evaluation is 4 hours or 4.5 hours, but I don't do that. I'm trying to streamline it. So we're doing about 2.5 hours. I hope that's enough time. If it's Basically, we schedule 2.5 hours. If we don't use the time, I don't charge you for it. I block it out, but this I don't want to run out of time, because it can be really going deep can really answer a lot of important questions, and it takes time to go deep. So you'll also, before you come in, you'll meet with one of our staff members who will take a thorough history, which I'll have, and you'll collect your medical records and bring them to the appointment, and then someone obviously will come with you. At the time of the appointment, I'll go over the qEEG with you, go over the medical history that we have, and I'll be trying to figure out, okay, what's exactly going on, not only what kind of aphasia is it and how you're scoring. You'll also do baseline scoring of the aphasia with our speech therapist beforehand. And then we'll decide on a treatment plan, and we're aiming to do the first treatment at the evaluation. Hopefully that will work. The treatment itself is anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 minutes. First treatment is a little longer. We have to measure and, et cetera. So that evaluation is, let me put it this way, instead of going through all the details, the whole thing, if you are doing neurofeedback, which you may not be doing, comes to around, there's a high estimate is about $13,000 or 13 and a half. It could be less if you're not doing neurofeedback. We'll abort the treatment if we're not seeing any improvement, but that would include about 10 or 12 laser treatments. I'm not sure what's in that. We just did an estimate of the price the other day. Now, in terms of insurance, the question is, of course, insurance. No, it's not covered. I opted out of insurance in 1991 when managed care came on the scene. And they asked me to promise that I would let them tell me how long and how often I could see the patient for. And I said, you know what? At that time, I had 3 kids, and I had like $50,000 in the bank. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to deliver the highest quality care I can deliver. If people want it, they'll come. And if they don't want it, they won't come. I'll just take my $50,000. I'll open up a candy store somewhere. That's all. I'm not doing this. I'm not compromising myself. I'm just, that's the way I'm built. It's quality or nothing. And that's how I practice. So that's what we do. So I opted out of, we were working with insurance for a long time until maybe 2008 or something like that. And then we collected data for a patient. It was a whole box of data, and then Blue Cross Blue Shield. And then we sent it to the address they asked us to send it to. This whole box took hours and hours to put this together for them. And then we gave you the wrong address. And I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm practicing medicine. I wish the healthcare system was different. I wish it wasn't so expensive. We have 6.5 people working. We have a very nice operation. We have a very smooth operation. We're not perfect, but we really strive to help. We have a nurse who helps people. We have a coach. We have a nutritionist. We have administrative staff. We have psychologists. We have a wonderful team. In all my 46 years, I'm like, wow, finally, I've got a great team going here. It hasn't been easy to learn how to pick the right people, but we're doing it, and so I'm really happy with that. So that's the situation. I know, I know it's expensive. I'm not naive, but it is what it is. I am where I am. I'm doing what I'm doing.
That's right.
Yep,
absolutely. But if it can make a difference, right? Somebody's going to reach out to you through the website, wholepsychiatry.com. Would it be you having that initial kind of phone consultation with them, or your intake coordinator, and see if it's even a possibility?
Yeah, they would talk with either Sean or Caitlin. They'll receive an email asking them, first of all, I'll get their form. They'll fill out a contact form, which will ask specific questions. That will be sent to me, and I will, based on that, determine whether I think it's likely that I can help or not. And then if I think I can help, I'll tell Sean or Caitlin, yes, they can contact the patient. They will contact them either way. They might say, no, you're not appropriate for this practice. Or if they say yes, then they will have the option of setting up a 15 or 30-minute Zoom consultation. Unless they were local, they could come in. But generally it's Zoom, just to meet each other, see if this might work, answer basic questions, me to assess really what's the level of support that they have. That's for me the most important question, because most of the time I know who I can help, I know who I can't help. And then from there, if they decide they want to go forward and I decide that I want to go forward, then Sean would take them through the process of, all the steps that are involved.
This has been a tremendous hour with you to learn about this technology and how you're applying it and the potential for aphasia. Aphasia from stroke, aphasia from traumatic brain injury, any kind of neuro kind of condition. You talked about dementia. We covered primary progressive aphasia. I mean, it's exciting stuff. So
It's very exciting.
For the audience, I encourage you, if you are interested in this, first go to wholepsychiatry.com. I'll put the website back up. We got a little ticker down there at the bottom. Do that first because he's got a lot of great information on there. You get to see his interview on another podcast on there. Actually, I think there's 2 of them on there. So that is a good place to start. And if you want to learn more, reach out through that contact form on wholepsychiatry.com.
We have actually many videos. I used to have a radio show. I think the radio show is still there. There's a lot of resources.
There's so much good stuff. Yeah. They're not going to find a lot of just aphasia stuff, but this is all neuro. It's all the brain and it's all connected.
Yeah, it's a neuropsychiatric practice now. It's not where I started, right? But like I said, it's been a long and winding road.
Yeah, but this is where you are, and it's cutting edge. Thank you, Dr. Hedaya. It's been my pleasure to spend this time with you and learn about this, and let's stay in contact. And when you have more results to share, let's do this again.
I'd love to.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Genevieve.
So much.
Pleasure.
So what did you think of that interview with Dr. Hedaya? Did that spark an interest for you? Are you skeptical about if there is a treatment available that could really help, kind of, as I heard it, exciting the cells in your brain to help with some recovery? Of course, it's not a one-size-fits-all treatment. It's another possibility. And that's what's so exciting about it. And I really loved my conversation. Again, I wish you could have heard the conversation before we hit record and the conversation we hit after record. But the point is, he is passionate about this work he's doing. He is not just in this, as a fly by night, as a quick fix. He believes in this treatment and he wants to make an impact in the world. So if you want to learn more about the HYLANE treatment, please go to wholepsychiatry.com. We will be linking their website in the show notes wherever you're listening to this, or if you're watching this on the computer, the links are in there, and check those out and learn more. There's exciting things to come. And before I let you go, I have 2 free resources for you. For the person with aphasia, did you know that aphasia recovery never stops? In this episode, we talked a little bit about neuroplasticity and what you can do on your own. And so at Life Aphasia Academy, we made a guide just for you. There's lots of ideas in there. There's documentation as to why neuroplasticity is your best friend and how you can activate it on your own. If you would like this guide, I encourage you to click on the link that says 3 key reasons aphasia recovery never stops. And for you, the spouse care partner, we also have something for you. We understand that your journey is not one you signed up for. You weren't trained in it, and you're probably not getting all the support and the resources that you need to do it well. And by doing it well, I mean taking care of yourself, finding that space to do things for yourself, to step away from that role of being a caretaker or a caregiver and moving into the role of a care partner. When you have a person with aphasia, we know that it's complicated. Communication is one of these things we take for granted. And when something like aphasia comes along, it's challenging to find that path forward. But there is a path forward, and we have mapped it out for you, the spouse and caregiver, care partner. And the first step to that is signing up for our free 5-day email course. What you'll receive is 1 email a day for 5 consecutive days that gives you one action step that you can implement in 15 minutes. It's just a little bit of time we're asking you to set aside in your busy day to help give you a little more control, to give you some time to reflect. You know that you're stressed and overwhelmed and that there's just a lot of complication to it all. And we want to help you feel like you have better control. The course is called From Chaos to Clarity email course. It's free to you, and we encourage you to download that now and get started. 15 minutes a day. Thank you for being here with us each week. We are working really hard behind the scenes to bring you content that is meaningful and that can help you transform your life, because you may have aphasia, but you don't have to be the person defined by aphasia. You can live your life and still have aphasia and still also find joy and a way forward and build the life that you can love. Until next time, friends, we will see you on the Listen for Life Aphasia podcast. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Listen for Life Aphasia podcast. For captions, transcripts, show notes, and to meet Archie, our interactive bot, visit listenforlifeaphasiapodcast.com. If this episode brought you a win, big or small, subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who needs it. Recovery is about connection, and every win matters. Take care and keep celebrating your wins, and I'll see you all next time.